Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Emergency Council meeting for Tuesday, March 24th at 1 p.m. And I'm calling it to order with all council present. If you would stand and join me for the pledges.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Under the Texas flag, I pledge allegiance to Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
Thank you, everyone. And I don't see any citizens, so I assume we have no signups. Okay. Thank you. Moving on now to item number 5, the reason we're here. Again, we have 2 items under approvals, authorizations, but it's really, the second one is the actual approval. But this first area is discussion on precautionary public health measures in reference to COVID-19 virus. Also, to give kind of an update, tell you what's been going on here in the city and surrounding, and some discussions that we've had with some other folks. So first of all, thank you everyone for being here in the middle of the day for this emergency session. Appreciate that you're all here. And just like the other meeting, the objective of this meeting is to ensure that you all know as much as we do, inform you all, as well as enable you to make decisions based on being informed, and to ensure our public is informed as this is being recorded as well as live streamed. I'm going to open with some remarks again and then hand it over to our city leadership so they can tell you how everything's going in each one of the departments and where we've been moving forward. So it's kind of the same way we ran it last Tuesday. Contextually, now that we have the declaration of state of emergency by our president, we have the state of disaster proclamation by our governor, and also most recently, since the last time we met, the executive order GA-08 by our governor, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that GA-08 here in a minute. But again, contextually, then I signed a local disaster declaration for our city. I signed it on Thursday for it to go in effect Friday midnight. And the reason for my signing that was to directly complement and reiterate what is in GA-08. The long and short of it is what we determined, and this council, this is important, what we determined was that there was a lot of chatter, a lot of discussion, and not a lot of consensus on how does a local government enforce what the governor signed in his GA-08. But we determined that if a municipality, Garden Ridge, was to also declare, make that declaration, it now put into effect some existing laws, Title 122, and we can talk about that, but basically made it a lot simpler, cleaner, and easier for us to literally enforce what he had put in his executive order. So I sent that to you Saturday morning with a quick explanation and telling you about this meeting, and the long and short of it is my declaration, good for 7 days. That's why you're back in here, so we can ratify it in whole, in part, or in any form that you desire. But my declaration was to make sure that we could enforce what our governor had put into an executive order. And we're not the only city that came to that conclusion, either before or after we did. But so that was pretty much the reason why we did that. I sent you that declaration. You also have it. You should have it. I think you have it in front of you. Do they have it in front of them? Yeah, you have the ordinance only. Okay. And the purpose of this meeting, not only to discuss what's going on and see if there's anything else that we need to do, but to then ratify, if you will, the word ratify is my word, but to approve ordinance 227-03-2020, which will then extend the declaration that I made last Friday for duration, and we'll talk about the specifics of duration and triggers and everything that go with that ordinance. That is now up to you. A few other things, just want to give you some background on. If you're paying attention, cities and counties to the north, to the south, pretty much all around us have made these similar declarations, and then some have done some closure orders. New Braunfels has a closure order in effect that basically has closed any business that can assure that customers as well as business people in the business can stay 6 feet away from each other. So nail salons, hair cutting places, that kind of thing, that's in New Braunfels, not in Comal County. Comal County has not put out anything else, any restrictions beyond what you are already were aware of basically last week. Bexar County and San Antonio have jumped on the shelter-in-place bandwagon. Also, Harris County, I understand that Travis is going to be doing it if they haven't done it already, and a few, at least the large counties and cities are either talking about it, have done it, and a few of the small ones. But the interesting thing about the shelter-in-place orders, and I think it's important that when people hear that there's a shelter-in-place order and they go, oh, well, what's, the sky has actually fallen. When you read the exceptions to the shelter-in-place orders, the exceptions are pages long. And in fact, our governor made that comment a few days ago when he talked about some of the shelter-in-place orders are so involved with so many exceptions that so many people in one way, shape, or form lobby to get themselves or their group on that exception list, that there's very few people left that are actually sheltering in place. That is, in fact, I would tell you, if you read Bexar counties particularly, it is the exceptions are rather lengthy, and it's almost any business you're involved with, you're going to be accepted. So the utility of that remains to be seen, other than just making a statement, if you will, that hey, people need to stay home if they can. I still believe that as a city we need to stay informed. We need to stay in front of it. We need to do our part to not raise hysteria, but at the same time ensure that we're doing what we can to prevent the spread, protect our citizens, protect our staff, and preserve our ability to continue operations in the city as best we can. Tell you that I've been talking to Comal County Emergency Management Director Jeff Kelly nearly daily. I just talked to him 20 minutes ago, and just checking in, seeing where they are, where we are. I talked to our Commissioner Hogg this afternoon as well. Actually, I guess it was this morning. It was late morning. Talked to him, and we're all on the same page with where we are, what we're doing. They have no intention at this point to do anything further, but they're watching the maps and they're watching the spread and everything else. If you're also paying attention, another concern is starting to enter into the equation, and it is just what is this doing to our nation and the state and to the communities economically. And based on the actions that are being taken, do we need to go further and kind of rip the Band-Aid off and do something to be able to stop this faster? Because as our Lieutenant Governor said, at this point we're going to run the risk of preventing people from getting COVID-19 and destroying our nation's economy. So I tell you that if you haven't been paying attention, I ask you to start paying attention to that, because as you see the jurisdictions and the decisions around, I believe you're going to start to see some of that tempering some of the decisions or accelerating some of the decisions in some cases, and that makes sense if you think about it. I also talked to our emergency manager about the cases that exist now. As of basically this morning, there were 4 in Comal County, but they are convinced that there'll be plenty more. They have a lot of tests out, and recall that 2 days ago when they did the tests, the tests weren't just random people. They were people that believed they had some type of symptom to begin with. So you do a kind of a analysis, a statistical analysis of, you get 80 people that have some kind of symptom, how many people are going to end up testing positive. So they're pretty convinced that we're going to end up with more positive cases. But depending on how that goes and depending on the spread, you can look at Johns Hopkins has a map that shows the spread, the nationwide spread and all that, and you can see how that if there's hot spots and those kind of things. And so that's all going into the mix on the decisions both in the state and the county. And I mentioned a lot about that because that's where we're taking a lot of our direction from. Unless you feel very strongly about it, I don't recommend we get in front of them with any of these actions. The other thing is, I asked about the 830-221-1120. If you recall, that's the hotline, and we've had a couple people that I know of use it. One person said it took about 10 minutes on waiting, in the queue, but that they ask very direct and pointed questions and then give you advice based on what you're telling them, whether you need to go get tested, whether you need to be quarantined, those kinds of things. And that's the effort to kind of put everybody on the same sheet, so you're not getting different advice from different people and but everybody's kind of working off the same sheet. So, but I asked what are they doing about the fact that it's got limited hours, and our staff noticed that to the south of us, there are some hotlines that have a little bit longer hours, and I asked them, should we be considering calling those as well? And interestingly, they said that they're looking real hard right now at extending the hours because they're getting a lot of business on that number, and they're looking to extend the hours further with that hotline. So keep your ear to the ground with that when we find out, and I'm sure they'll post the new hours as soon as they determine what they are. A couple of side points, but I just want to let you know some background. If you've had anybody asking you about dumpsters, we have one more dumpster weekend. Spoke to Republic, spoke to Public Works, and we determined that we can keep people in their cars until they're ready to dump the stuff. And in fact, last weekend, our guy up there stayed a good 10 feet away from everybody. In fact, he said he didn't even help anybody unload. Everybody unloaded themselves. So as long as we're going to put a sign up there, we're going to make sure everybody's well educated. Talk to the general manager at Republic, and he agreed. So we're going to do it, and then we don't have to decide again until May, because April is not a dumpster month anyway, and this weekend is the last weekend. So those dumpsters will be. I also made the case with him that in the world of public health, you want to get rid of trash. You want to get rid of stuff. You don't want to let stuff build up. And more people are staying home. They're generating more trash. And I assume that we got into a little bit of it where we have a lot of people staying home and they're doing a lot of yard work. And then all of a sudden there were 25 bags of yard trash out in front of people's house during trash day, and it was overwhelming Republic. And so they asked that at least for the next couple of weeks to limit it to one bag of yard trash. They didn't put a limit on regular household trash, but a bag of yard trash. Their plan is, if this continues to go for a while, they will start to transition some of their vehicles and staff from business and commercial trash pickup to more residential and have more capability and capacity to work in our neighborhoods. But in the short term, that's on our website, and we've explained to people what and why for that. But another relief valve will be that people can bring this stuff up here this weekend. Another thing is, as I mentioned, the shelter in place. The shelter in place does have a little bit of an effect on us in Garden Ridge, in that we have a lot of staff that live in communities, cities and counties, that either are enacting a shelter in place or will have a shelter in place. Again, there's so many exceptions, and government work and those kind of things are all in there. So we don't see this being a problem, but we created a letter and issuing it to everybody, all the staff, all the employees, that they will have with them. So if some authority tries to stop them and say you shouldn't be out right now, they can say, no, actually, I'm an exception. I work for the city of Garden Ridge. I'm essential, and I'm either on my way there or on the way back. So we don't foresee that being a problem. Although in Bear County, they managed to say that it only was about servicing Bear County. I thought that was really nice of them to forget that there's other counties around them. And then, so I think we have that well in hand for now. Last thing, as a kind of a minor aside, is we have locked down City Hall. You'll hear from admin, you'll hear from our city secretary about procedures we put in place for packages and mail, taking this really seriously because we want to do everything we can to maintain our operation up here. And that's why we're all spread out right now. We're practicing what we preach. We're all spread out. We had a staff meeting yesterday, and we did the same thing. We spread out, and anytime we're going to get together, we're going to do that. We're also looking at alternative work schedules and keeping people away from each other and giving them a job to do where they're not with anybody else. We consider this an opportunity to kind of catch up a little bit as well, but nevertheless, doing everything we can. But turning it onto y'all, I'd ask you to consider to avoid coming up here as much as you can. We certainly, this is your city and you're running it, but email, phone calls, and we'll get you anything you need or want to know about, and we'll take care of you. But if you would, please try to avoid coming up here for at least the next few weeks, and because we need to keep you healthy as well, because you're the ones that are representing the citizens right now. So please keep that in mind. But complete and total access anyway. Somebody made a comment that they were calling and nobody was answering, and which is strange to me because I've been spending time and up front, and I can tell you the phones aren't ringing that much. The phones work, and the phones aren't ringing that much. And so our folks are more than able to answer the phone. It hasn't really been a problem. But if you're having any problem, call me directly if you can't get through through the city number or through an email. So I want to turn now to what we're doing to maintain our operation and to maintain the safety and health of our folks as well as the citizens. I can tell you that your leadership, the folks that are in here, as well as the folks that are on their teams, have been doing an absolutely amazing job to get creative about work schedules, to get creative about being able to do work from home through VPNs, all kinds of things that we had not had in place before. The hard work, innovation, and how much they very clearly care about making this happen is something that I just want you to know. If you saw this, it's a lot behind the scenes, a lot of stuff you'll probably never hear about or see, but you'd be very, very proud of everything that they've been doing. So now I'm going to turn it over to our city administrator, Ms. Kane, and she's going to also go through each department, and they're going to give you a quick rundown about what's going on with them, what they care about, or what they're doing, or what their challenge is, or how they see the future unfolding thus far. So turn it over to you, Ms. Kane.
Thank you, Mayor. I got it, Marissa. City department heads have been working very hard on trying to tweak up things within their department so we can keep the continuity of services to the residents. They've worked very hard. We've been in constant communication. They have gone so far as looking into the operations just very intricately and pinpointing things that they could tweak up to help that continuity, things that some of us hadn't even thought of. So I want to start calling on the department heads, and I'm going to start with Chief Sue. Would you please update the council on what the PD is doing?
Yes, ma'am. Can y'all hear me okay?
No, we need you.
Okay.
We need you on mic. We're recording.
Okay, there we go. Good afternoon. So right now, the police department, we're still providing all services. I have altered work schedules. Some have alternating days. We have alternating shifts in order to prevent stacking up of officers when they come in. We're not doing shift briefings, so we can keep people separated in offices. We've moved our offices to make sure that no one is utilizing the same space. I would like to add that I do have one officer who is on quarantine at my request. He had to travel outside the area. It was still domestic. It was within the state, but an outreach of the state. And due to the fact that he flew in the area he went in and out of, I took the precaution and quarantined him at home. So he is on a 2-week quarantine at this time. Still does not create any issues for coverage or workforce or any of that matter. We're still able to provide all the services that we need to. I figured better be safe than sorry. Don't know what's coming up in the next couple weeks. The worst case scenario is he comes back in 2 weeks and everybody stayed healthy. So other than that, we are still good. And if anybody has any questions, I can surely try to answer them.
Starting over on the right side, questions or comments for the PD?
Do you anticipate any change if, a mandate comes down that we need a shelter in place? I'm assuming that the police department is basically all essential functions.
Yes, ma'am.
Fall into that.
Yes,
okay.
ma'am, we do.
Okay.
Sir, ma'am.
Nope.
The only other thing I'd like to add is just ask people out there for a little common sense. Everybody's at home. Everybody's doing, as the mayor said, yard work, housework, kids are home. I have noticed a huge increase in outdoor activity. Some of that is filtering into the roadways. I ask that they just be cautious, and the roadways are for vehicles and they're not for children playing and that sort of thing. And the last thing is, if anybody sees, we don't have a lot of businesses, but if anybody sees any price gouging or sees anything on social media about any sort of gouging of any sort of services or materials, please notify us so that we can get a report done on that.
Good words, Chief, thank you. Yeah, that's a really good point that I hadn't thought about. I'm driving through neighborhoods and I'm seeing that. We all need to be extra vigilant because there's a lot more people than we're used to walking and playing throughout the neighborhood. Really, really good point. Ma'am?
Oh, I'm so sorry. Water. Mr. Parsons.
Thank you, Ms. Nancy. So the water department, morale's still good. We have looked at alternate schedules as well. Morale's still good. Questions are being asked, but we're finding answers to those questions for the guys, and we're trying to keep everything as safe as possible for them. We're cleaning quite a bit, making sure we're sanitizing everything. And we have a protocol list as well, and we're going through those steps and procedures. Ma'am?
Starting over on the left side, questions or comments for water? Sir, ma'am. Yeah, it's a little bit detailed, and he's still working on it. But I want to just point out that it's actually he and Public Works are really drilling down deep to work some scheduling as we may have to back off a number of people here, or to make sure that people aren't working at the same time. And they're putting a lot of work and a lot of analysis into it, and really innovative thought. So he didn't mention it, but I just want to let you know that he's really working hard on it along with Mr. Steinmetz. So, thank you. Ma'am.
Public Works.
You hear me? We're continuing with our cleaning of all the buildings several times a day. We've ordered some extra dispensers that we can hang up on the walls for the building, so they're more accessible to the public and employees, so they can open doors and not have to worry about wiping their hands on themselves or anything like that. We've ordered a 55-gallon drum of some non-corrosive germicidal cleaner that we can use on anything in the buildings. So it's going to last us a long time. Plus, since it's non-corrosive, we can use it on the playgrounds so we don't rust them out before their time. We're keeping the employees assigning them jobs to where they're more apt to work alone to prevent exposure from other employees if they were to get sick. We've purchased a UV light air cleaner for the Public Works building, so sanitize the air a little bit better since we come through there quite often. We still have one person on self-quarantine, and they're doing good. We keep in contact with them every day and make sure that they're doing fine, and everything seems to be going well with them. So we expect them to be back pretty soon.
On the right side, questions or comments? Sir. And again, he's the other half of that work schedule that I showed you, and he's also put a lot of work and a lot of thought into how to keep people separated, either through jobs or through the schedule, and I really appreciate that. Our goal in all of this is that we don't want to put ourselves in a situation where one person all of a sudden comes up sick, and now we have no workforce. So keeping them separated, separated through both scheduling and physicality of where the job is something that will help to mitigate and that risk. So appreciate what you're doing as well. Okay, thanks.
Library.
I'm so sorry. There's a list of library procedures I think you all have. We've just done some library checkout housekeeping. We've done an outreach of compiling lists of online books, online story times, and all of those have been posted on Facebook. Of course, the website, Facebook, Nextdoor, and I send out an email, and so those are all listed there. We've done some health housekeeping. Wendy and Mrs. Bippert and I have cleaned all the furniture, keyboards, toys. We've gone into Legos, American Girl dolls. Everything is spiffy and clean, and we've decided we need to keep it that way. I ordered a commercial book sanitizer, and this is good not just for now, but it's for always, because germs lurk in books, especially children's books, you know, that kind of thing. And of course, adult books have dirt of a different sort, but I can't help that. Just the germy kind. And also, I have ordered a UV light that can be moved around the library to keep that air clean of viruses and mold, and that's good for always, not just now. And I tried to look for some positive sides in all of this. And one of the things I found is we have taken a deeper look at how to better keep things clean and healthy at all times. And I just thought, you know, in trying times, the more we communicate with our communities, offering information, options, a bit of kindness and comfort, the stronger our social infrastructure comes. And we can really build relationships right now. It's very heartening to see people reach out, like Councilwoman Swint is reaching out to her neighborhood, how the employees are filling in for each other, and there's good, I think there's good feelings, everybody's got good morale. And businesses like H-E-B that's reaching out to try to help their community. And so I'm hoping everybody becomes kinder and gentler, even those toilet paper hoarders. And then another upside to this, and I think I just want to say this to you all, is we're seeing the larger picture. This is especially helpful to us, those of us who don't carry the responsibility that you all carry. It's our, as well as your, civic duty to shelter our community, to try and prevent the spread of the virus, to protect our immunocompromised citizenry and our elderly. Many of my volunteers fall into that category. And it should never be about politics, but about the preservation of our future. I'm thankful for the tough decisions that our government, including you, Mayor Thompson, you, the City Council, and Administrator Kane, that you have to make. May the Lord be with you. Thank you for making the hard choices, and we will do everything we can to support every decision you make.
Thank you, ma'am. Left side, comments or questions?
I can't top that. That was beautiful. Thank you.
Ms. Crossan, thank you so much. Thanks for, and I'm gonna drop a dime on you and tell on you that in our staff meeting, one of the things that she said was that she was willing to help any other department that needed any help. And sincerely meaning that, saying, hey, you need somebody to answer phones, and her words were, I can answer phones. What she said, but she's backing it up with her actions as well. So thank you so much. We appreciate
Thank
you.
you, Mayor.
Ma'am.
Finance, HR.
Okay, from the HR side of the house, this morning I designed the essential personnel memo that, yeah, we're hungry. The memo that the mayor has already alluded to, and a little forward thinking on that to cover it not just for the COVID-19, but also for future weather closings and other designated emergencies that might be down the pipeline that we don't know about. We also received the laptops for the personnel yesterday, so 6 laptops came in, and with the help of Kat and Lieutenant Bellinger, they set those up for us so that we can VPN from home. And then the last thing is that we're starting to track expenditures for COVID-19. I've asked all of the other department heads to make sure they clearly mark it on invoices so that if we get the opportunity to charge anything back to the federal government or local government, we'll be ready for that when it happens. That's it.
Thank you, ma'am. Right side, comments or questions?
I guess I have 2 comments. One, I'm a little bit concerned about your position because there's not a lot of redundancy in the stuff that you do. So stay healthy, please. And the second is, can you tell us a little bit more about the essential staff menu or a memo? I guess what I really kind of want to know from everybody is when it comes down to it, what do we consider essential to keep the city running? And, juxtapose that with what is safest for our employees.
Well, I'm not sure I'm the right person to be asking for that
Okay.
because everybody from the governor to county to local all has different opinions on what that is. So that is probably something that you guys
Well,
decide.
and if I may, don't be misled by the mention of a essential personnel menu or memo. That letter is to everybody that's an employee. There's no value judgment on who we gave that letter to. But in that letter, it also says that your supervisor will identify you if you don't need to come to work. So at this point, and in fact, I've alluded to that in some of the alternative work schedules that they're working up, we'll say, okay, don't come in on Tuesday. You're going to work from home on Tuesday, and the other person's going to come in on Wednesday, and so they're working out those kinds of things. The purpose of the letter saying essential personnel is to dot the I and cross the T for these stay-at-home, because they're not selling cars, so they have to have a reason to be driving around the city. But your question is a great question, but that wasn't really the intent of that memo. So good question, but not what the memo is all about. Does that answer your question? Anything else? The thing about the expenditures, think about it. You've heard from a couple of people talking about UV lights and cleaners and stuff like that. All of that is part of what Ms. Ford was talking about as far as we're keeping track of expenditures. And it could be grants, it could be any number of potential avenues of us recovering some or all costs. And a lot of it is still up in the air. But the idea, as I said, was what we were talking, I said, there's nothing worse than waiting until April 14th, not this year, but in the normal years, waiting April 14th to do your taxes. So, and trying to come up with all the records. So we're keeping the records now, so whenever we determine what relief we can get from any expenses, we'll be ready. That's the whole reason for that. Thank you very much, ma'am.
City administrator, I mean, not city administrator, city secretary.
Thank you, City Administrator.
You're quite welcome.
So in admin department, we've talked about it a couple times now. We've been working through alternating schedules, putting some procedures in place, basically what's gonna work and how and when and where, you know, all the little details that you didn't think of before, and then you think of one additional thing, and then you think you've thought of everything, and another question is asked. So there's a lot that goes into it. Even when you only have a couple of people that you're dealing with, there's a lot of things that we've considered. So that's not finalized yet, but we are working on it. Color-coded, of course, because why wouldn't it be? We've also, it's in draft. It'll be finalized after this meeting though, because that's how close it is to being done. Put in protocols for handling, retrieving mail from the mailbox and the drop box, just to keep our employees safe. They'll be a little more detailed, because I want it to be able to reach any employee in any department. If another department person and staff were to, like they normally do, and they're very nice and come and help and they check the mail, which any other time is great. We want them to know these protocols that we have in place, because we have them in place for the safety of our staff. They include putting gloves on. We're gonna have boxes, cardboard boxes that are dedicated, and basically all of the mail and anything from the drop box is gonna go into a quarantine period, because we aren't charging any late notices right now, or late fees right now, and so nothing is so pertinent that it has to be open right now that take the chance of there being something on these envelopes or in the mail, so just extra precaution. Many of y'all, if not all, probably saw the sign when you walked in, if you came through the front door, about packages. It's hard to miss. It's a sandwich board sign. We wanted to make sure that we got the attention of any delivery drivers with all the other information we have up there. So it's a sandwich board out there that talks about if you're delivering packages, you know, please place the delivery in the designated area. It's right out there in the corner. It's covered. We would like to minimize any in-person contact that our staff has with the delivery drivers, just an extra precautionary. I know FedEx for sure has now taken the signature aspect out of the equation. They told our staff that personally. They're only asking for first initial and last name, and they will ask that over the phone. So our staff doesn't even have to go to the door to get those packages. And then every day before they leave, they'll check that area and bring any packages in. They'll also go through a quarantine period, and so they won't actually be opened until 2 days later for both of those. So those are the big things that we've thought of putting into place for protocols on keeping them safe. Things that we can't control, basically. We can't control the mail and the packages, but we can control how they're handled. So we're looking at all those little things and what we can control and what we can do to limit their exposure. Alternating them not being here on the same day has been discussed. That's something that we're looking into. If it's not needed, and can one of them work from home during this day, and how exactly would all of that work? Those are still in the works. I think that's all. Did I miss anything? No.
I think you fairly well covered it. Thank you.
Well done. Right side, questions, comments?
picked up some good ideas for our business, which is just down the block, especially with packages. There are all kinds of things you can do, I guess. You just got to have someone mention them. Thank you.
How capable are you guys for working at home?
As Karen mentioned, we had our VPNs all set up on laptops yesterday. That includes all of our admin staff, with the exception of the court clerk. She could be added if we got to that point. She could include her in the VPN, but right now that is department heads that got all of those. So we had the capability if we needed to, with the exception of our court clerk.
Okay, and working at home, is there any essential functions you'd miss? I'm still trying to get my head around this essential function thing.
I don't know, I guess it more so depends on what y'all decide. I mean, if y'all decide that you know, something is essential that another city may not deem essential, I don't know. I think that's
Okay.
probably gonna depend on any action that's taken. I mean, like Karen was saying, I mean, not all of them are the same. If you read all of these
Right.
orders, they're a little different, so the size of the city definitely has to be considered too. Some of these large cities have more staff, and so they have a lot of people that they don't need to come in, and they would consider them non-essential, whereas we might not. I don't think I have a set answer for that one yet, though.
Again, a good question. Consider the fact that we don't have that many. Also, council, keep in mind, admin's down 2 people, water's down a person, PD's down 2 people. So, you know, we talked about this, and if we had 100 people in an office or in a department, we could take a slice of that and send them home and call them a strategic reserve. Don't come to work unless everybody else is infected, and then you come to work. And, but we can't do that. So we're trying to keep people as separated as possible, and through all the things that we've already mentioned. And the other, it's a very good question. You consider, okay, so what's essential? Could we just shut the city down other than water and a law enforcement and say, well, nothing else? Well, there's a balance there because, again, we do have some businesses still running and people building and perhaps needing a permit or any number of things like that. Now, all of that is now, we're advising people how to do it online or to make an appointment to come in to bring in paperwork or any of that thing. So we've degraded it considerably, but we still have enabled people to do business with their city because we, you know, again, this balance. You know, do we want to say the sky has completely fallen and we're just shutting the whole thing down and putting a big chain around the door? And I personally, I don't think we're there. And so that's why we're looking to be able to continue to answer the phone. Or when somebody calls and asks us today, are you going to do shelter in place? So we can give them an answer instead of just saying, hey, nobody's home, look at the website. We're trying to still be there for people. So that's sort of our approach. Sir.
Oh, we don't have any extras here. Everybody is essential. Everything is run lean. We actually went to, I'm assuming it's still going on, training another individual to do one person's job in case something happens to that person. So we don't have the excesses, and literally every person here is absolutely necessary.
Ma'am.
Just a quick question about, like, essential is like patrolling the park and so on considered essential? I don't mean like the cameras, I mean like picking up the trash and all that. That's throughout the city. Is that considered essential?
I'm not going to answer that. I'm going to look to Public Works because I've actually identified to them that some of those kinds of things, you know, there's a balance, and we've talked a lot about this. Some of those kinds of things we can continue to do because the elegance of it is one person can do it by themselves, not come in contact with anyone else, right? And we've also had a lot, and council, this is another, I think, important point that we've had as staff discussions about, that this too shall pass. And when it does, we don't want to be, oh my God, we've done nothing for the last month. And we were really busy and we were behind and we were short of people before, and now we've got to catch up from all the things we didn't do for the last month. So all of your leaders are looking at what can they do to not have that happen. So if it's keeping the park up, but it's one person that doesn't come anywhere near anybody else, we don't increase the risk where that person is still gainfully and importantly employed, but yet stuff will still get done. Same thing with every one of our departments. So we are also looking at it in terms of an opportunity to clean up Nancy's office.
Yeah.
I had to pick on her, but the point is that we also see it as an opportunity to kind of catch up on some things as well that we haven't been able to because right now a lot of the demand is down, and so we might be able to catch up. So it's not just about absolute bare minimum essential, but keeping a lobster eye towards this is going to end, and when it ends, we don't want to have a disaster on our hands of all the things we haven't done for however long that duration was. Does that?
I agree.
Thanks. Ma'am.
Staff will continue looking at their departments, continuing monitoring the situation and making any adjustments that we feel are necessary so that we can keep the continuity of services to our residents. That is very important to us, as well as keeping our staff safe and healthy.
And so finally, any questions or comments for our city manager? Starting left side.
I do have a question about the parks, about the sign you requested, and I don't know if it's appropriate place or not. The instructions last week were to follow Governor Abbott's instructions about 10 or more congregating. Are we going to change that or leave it as is? I went and put all the signs at all the parks.
Well, and I don't want this to sound like a smart aleck answer, but I don't know if you're going to change it because y'all are the ones that could change it if
Okay,
you
well, I'm
wanted to.
bringing it to the forefront.
But yes, Governor Abbott hasn't changed that, and if your decision is to stay consistent with what the state's doing and the county's doing, then the answer would be yes, and it would remain that way. I think by the end of this meeting, you'll have an answer, so.
Okay.
Anything else, ma'am? Sir?
I'm just gonna look at everybody and go, keep up the good work. I like what I hear.
Thank you.
Sir? Yeah, again, City Administrator Nancy, thank you so much for the leadership and all the hard work on this and all the time put into this. And of course, as I said, the staff, nobody will ever, the folks out there will never understand how much they put into this. Again, you'd be very, very proud to see all that they've done. Okay, a couple of things. You have in front of you the ordinance 227. And before we go to that ordinance, I'll just give you a quick refresher that in the back of that, Exhibit B is all the stuff that we've either done or the things that you decided last Tuesday. So the first part is implemented March 13th, and then the second part of Exhibit B is approved by City Council. So that is attached to that because it's important to keep all that in context, as well as to make sure anybody that reads this knows the actions that have been taken. And before turning to item 5B, I think it's appropriate now to open up the floor to y'all for anything that you'd like to talk about, issues, things you're seeing, hearing, anything you're concerned about before we dive into the actual ordinance itself. So starting over on the right side, anything at all? No, not yet. Sir?
Who are we paralleling right now as far as our actions? Is it the governor, the president? when do we make decisions and change what we're doing and that sort of thing?
And very good question, and part of that is answered in the ordinance, but the short answer is both. The presidential direction has been high level enough that hasn't really restricted the state, and then the state's direction is the thing that my declaration and what you're considering today for an ordinance is to echo and to support that the pronouncement by the governor, as well as the executive order that followed by the governor with those 4 points that are in Exhibit A. So my philosophy, and as I've talked to the county has the same philosophy, that they don't want to get out in front of the state if they can help it. So they're looking to support whatever the state is saying, and that's been my approach thus far.
The reason I'm asking, Mayor, is when you first started talking, you kept saying, listen to what's going on right now, what's taking place right now. Prior to the hour since we started this meeting, the president was on TV talking about waiting until about Easter and seeing how things progress, and he was immediately going to put the country back on its own track for success. Our lieutenant governor has the same opinion. So if we're listening to these people, when do we start relaxing what we do?
Well, the answer to that would be the same answer to your first question. We're echoing and supporting what they're doing. So, and I watched the president's speech. I watched the lieutenant governor's interview when he spoke about this. So I know exactly what you're talking about. And my recommendation to this body is to continue to do exactly that, to support what the governor.
I understand all that. What I'm saying is if the day after Easter, Monday, the president comes out and says, we're pretty much done with this, it's being successful what we're trying to do, and we're going to go back to reestablish this country as the best in the world. Are we going to stop this stuff ourselves that same day? Or is this going to take
It's going to depend on the state, because the state has
that's what I was
jurisdiction.
asking. Who are we following, the president or the state?
Okay, right now, they're consistent,
Okay.
sir,
All
okay?
right.
If the state becomes inconsistent with the president and the state declares that we have to do something, we have to do what the state says. If the state backs off, my recommendation
You're
is
right,
we
Mayor.
back off.
Yeah, you're right, because if the state supersedes anything the president says, then we have to follow it anyhow.
And in fact, the president has actually made that statement too.
Right,
So
okay.
no, I mean, the answer was, we're doing what both of them are doing, but if they become, if they're not in agreement, it's about the state, because the state has the authority to tell us. And then, and so if the state backs off, my recommendation to the council is we back off as well. If the state ratchets it up, my recommendation is we ratchet it up.
In a special meeting?
Not necessarily, and we're going to get to that when we talk about this ordinance. So you won't walk out of here without having an answer to that question, okay? Sir?
My only real question is probably directed to the chief. Have we seen any change in any criminal activity, anything like that? I've been hearing some little rumors through the grapevine. There's been some upticks in surrounding communities with criminal activity, burglaries, that kind of stuff. But that's about all I've heard, so I figured I'd ask, go direct to the source.
We haven't seen a change in anything that can be directly related to any of this. You know, there are some folks out there talking about how family violence has increased because people are sheltering. We are fortunate in this community that we have not seen that rise. So at this point, no, I have not seen any criminal activity directly related to the situation.
Great question also, and we've been talking about this because there's talk about letting people out of various incarcerated areas for reducing prison populations under this situation. So all law enforcement is keenly aware of all that and keeping track of it. But so far, nothing.
Yeah, and that was kind of my thought, that, and quite frankly, if you've been by HEB, I highly recommend doing the curbside, but if you've gone by, there's lots of people in line, there's a lot of people that are getting very stressed out, for lack of a better way to put this, with what's going on, and that tends to lead to an increase in poor behavior, is that the proper term? So
Yeah, they stress. They
Yeah,
stress.
It's stressed and then they react badly, you know, so I just was curious about that.
We don't have the situation where we have that sort of gathering of masses, so that helps eliminate a lot of that.
Thank you. Ma'am?
No.
Okay, so now moving on to item 5B, and that is specifically talking about ordinance 227. Want to remind you that Exhibit A is what was in the declaration that I approved at the end of last week that went into effect Friday night. These are exactly taken out of the executive order from the governor. Again, we did that because we found out that if we didn't do that, it would be difficult for us to enforce what the governor told us to enforce. It kind of left holding the bag. If you think about it, every ordinance that y'all have, in your experience, however long you've been sitting up here, have ever approved, there's always something about what the penalty is. And that executive order pronounced some pretty important things with no thought at all to what were the consequences. And so it left a lot of people kind of holding the bag, but then we found out that as long as we did a declaration and followed up within 7 days of an ordinance, we could then enforce those very things. And so that's what this is. There's no difference from what the governor put in his executive order and what we have here, his executive order GA08. That's the first thing I wanted to point out. Also, a few points on, you got this ordinance ahead of time, and before I ask for questions, comments, and anything you want to discuss, on section 2, you know, all the whereases, a lot of it's just factual, kind of running down what's been happening. But in section 2, the declaration of a local state disaster, you see that this extension, this runs concurrent with Governor Abbott's emergency declaration and with the executive order as GA08. It's subject to being extended, modified, amended, rescinded, or superseded by the governor. What that means is if the governor rescinds this stuff, then this ordinance becomes null and void as well. Okay? What's wrong? Yeah. Well, y'all have it in front of you. Let's continue. So that, I think that's part of the first answer to your question, is that, and see, and I'll tell you that you have a couple of options here. One is you can have a trigger of time, just time. You can have a trigger of you have to meet again and rescind it, or you can have a trigger that it's the governor, if the governor rescinds these things, then ours become rescinded. And I'm offering up my recommendation that it's the trigger with the governor, for the very reasons that we talked about. Because I looked at it and I said, well, if we put it that you were going to rescind it, and we had a discussion about this only a couple hours ago, and let's say the governor rescinds it the second week of whatever month, and we don't want to call up on a special session or everything else, we're going to be under an emergency declaration for 3 more weeks before you get together to be able to rescind it. So we thought that, assuming you agree with the concept that we're doing this in concert with the state, then it made sense to put that in there that way. And it was one of the options if you go through a bunch of the cities, you'll see a lot of cities have done this. A few of them have said they'll get back together. I don't know if any of them, because the third option is to put a time on it. And I don't know if anybody's actually put a time on theirs. But nevertheless, it's one thing I wanted to point out to you, and it's something that you can discuss at length if you want. Section 5, I want to point out to you that this is the authority, the 122.005 Health Safety Code and the 418 Texas Government Code gives us the ability to fine, to put teeth into this, and that's in Section 5. I think you got a version early on that may not have had that in there. So if you read your earlier version, that wasn't there, but it's now in there. Another thing I'd like to point out is Section 6, emergency powers. And our city secretary had an extensive discussion with our attorney on this what's in here and what it means. So I'm asking her now to explain this paragraph and what it means. Go ahead, please.
Thank you. So basically, if you'll look at the last sentence that states, "The mayor further reserves all other authority and powers conferred by state law to respond as necessary to this situation and may update rules and regulations set out in Exhibit A or measures set out in Exhibit B as necessary to respond to the evolving circumstances of this outbreak during the duration of the declaration without the issuance of a new declaration." So that means that we would not have to meet to add anything in here. The mayor has that power. He's designated as the emergency management director, and that gives him the same type of authority that the governor has, but limited to what is appropriate for the city. So, for example, if Comal County were to do something right after we adjourn this meeting, similar to what happened last week, we wouldn't have to meet again. Mayor has the power, his signature, my signature on an amendment that we would then add to this ordinance if we needed to add something after the fact. The city attorney explained that to me, saying that that's what a lot of cities have done. She already provided me a template because this is an ever-evolving situation. So to answer your question, Councilmember Berlanti, earlier is no, you wouldn't have to meet again as long as we leave wording like this in here to this effect.
Thank you, ma'am. So what I'm going to do now is start over on the left side and ask you if you have any comments, questions, concerns, anything at all to do with Ordinance 227, so we can bring it all out, come to a consensus, and have a motion and vote on this ordinance to move forward. So starting left side, ma'am.
Specifically to that point on 6, I certainly agree that that's the most appropriate way to handle it, to give the authority to you to follow, if you will, and then notify us, I assume by email.
Ma'am. Anything else, ma'am?
Thank you.
Sir?
I think we need to follow the guidelines of the experts. That seems to be well laid out in this ordinance. We need to follow the guidelines set by the governor of the state. And that's all laid out. I have no issues with it. It's common sense. Let's follow the guidelines. Let's listen to what the experts say and do it.
Fair enough. Thank you. Sir? Ma'am?
I agree with Councilman Arvidsson. I guess the one question I have, and I keep going back to employees because I just love them all so much. What does this look like long-term? You know, if there's a change, who makes the decision that X employee or Y employee goes home or comes in, or is that still done through you, or would you go back to the menu?
To the menu. Yeah.
The menu.
No, and that's something, it's interesting that you asked that, because we had a department head that kind of said, okay, how is this going to go? And what city administrator and I are still saying is we're looking to department heads to run their department.
Perfect.
So they figure out who can go home and who can stay, and how they can get things done, not get behind if they can help it, and keep people protected. So,
Okay, thanks.
sir.
I just have one thing, and I talked to you about this earlier. Places to avoid: eating, drinking bars, restaurants, food courts, massage parlors. I don't know if we have any around here. But what about hair salons? There's one in the city. And of course, there's no 6 feet there. That's the one thing that I would look at possibly to add.
Two things about
depends.
that. One is she closed. She decided to close, she told me.
Oh, she did? Okay.
We do have a massage. It's not a parlor. It's a guy that does massage. It's in the building that Diana's in.
A guy?
It's a
Oh.
guy, yeah. And the reason why that's not in there is, again, for what I was talking to Councilman Lanzi about, is that's not something that the state has declared. That's something that New Braunfels did. And we're not following, I mean, my intention is not to follow New Braunfels. My recommendation to you is not to follow New Braunfels, but to follow what the state did. Now, if there's any specific outliers that you do want to do, if you want to put that kind of thing in there, by all means, if you want to add that, we can do that. But that's the reason why it's not in there.
Since she's closed, let's just keep it clean.
And keep in mind also that if the state did come out with a closure order, and some people call it closure orders, there's lots of, the vernacular here is mind-boggling, but if they did something that was akin to what you see New Braunfels having done with their closure order and their amended closure order, that, according to what we have here, will then echo that. We'll do the same thing. But that's only if the state was to do it, unless you want to go any further than what the state says. And that's what we're doing here today. Does that answer your question, sir? Yes. Okay. All right. So reattacks on this. Anybody? So the what's up for approval here is ordinance 227. And if you approve that, we'll sign this thing and we'll watch what the state's doing. If anything moves further, I'll then have the authority to move ours further along with the state. If the state rescinds the emergency declaration, this gets rescinded as well, and we'll keep you posted all the way. Any further discussion or questions on this?
I would like to thank you personally for taking all the time you've done to put this all together, and everybody else here that has done what they've done. It's been an excellent job.
Thanks, sir. So if I could get a motion to approve the ordinance.
Move to approve.
This is ordinance 227-03-2020 from place 1. Can I get a second?
Second the motion. to
Place
approve.
5 with a second. Any further discussion or questions? All in favor of approving ordinance 227-03-2020, declaration of local disaster for the city of Garden Ridge, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It is unanimous. It is approved. Thank you very much. Citizen comment period, moving on to item 6, citizen comment period. Still don't have any citizens. I don't see anybody, so we're going to then move on. And actually, council, before we go, 2 things. In pertinent to citizens' comments, I want you to see what we did was we pushed, if any citizens were here, the citizen comment place would be way back there. And so let citizens know we could have accommodated them, let you know that we could have accommodated them. A couple things about meetings in the future before we move on. So we told you last time, the April meeting, the April 1st meeting, what was going to be accomplished there. And you basically kind of gave me the authority to cancel it, but I'm going to tell you now we're going to cancel it. There's no reason to have that meeting, so expect that there will be no meeting. You will receive information. You will receive akin to a package that will be reports from the department, so you're still going to know what they're doing and what's going on. But you will not receive anything that's for decision because we won't be having that meeting. If we have to have any more meetings, one thing we're really digging into is whether or not we can do it via telephone and online. And even cities with much, much deeper pockets and more resources of people and equipment have done it and have kind of fallen on their face. So we're going to move very, very carefully with this because we're talking about law that we still have to abide by and things like that. So, we'll do the best we can to not have to bring you back in until things turn around, and we'll keep you posted. And again, call and write anytime at all that you want to know anything that's going on, but we will be keeping you posted as well. Okay. Any final comments or questions from y'all up here?
Yeah, I just want to echo what Brian said. The amount of work you and everyone else here has done is pretty awesome. We come in here and in about 30 minutes, we get a pretty good update on what's going on basically everywhere. So I appreciate the amount of work that y'all are doing, very much so. And Councilman Arvidsson, just for the record, those people that are stressed out in line, that's what happens when you don't have enough TP.
Ma'am?
Great work, city. You guys are doing a fantastic job. And just citizen-wise, the best thing you can do for your neighbor right now is to stay put.
Thank you. Sir?
I'd like to come in, Councilman McCall. Not once today did you forget to turn on your mic. Thank you.
I'm not that old.
Sir?
Yeah, for the citizens, stay home, use common sense. If you got to go out, send one person. I've seen cars full of people out at HEB and things like that. Send one person. The less you can do to make contact with people, the better off we are right now for the next couple of weeks. And we can clean this thing up and we're good to go and we go back to having fun.
Ma'am?
Yes, thank you for making sure the dumpsters are again here, because I'm really trying to get my car back in the garage. And also, I will leave the signs as they are for those who might be listening and not reading this declaration, that it's disallowed 10 or more, but groups less than 10 can still meet in our parks.
Thank you, everyone. And yes, so a couple things. Last meeting, total with people that looked at Civic Plus and people that went on YouTube, just under 100 people watched, paid attention to what's going on. We'll keep you posted on how this one goes as well. And what we did was we had on the sign that the meeting was happening, and after we put on the sign that you can watch the meeting, go to the website and watch the meeting. And the final statement is that, yes, this is something where we're trying to make the impact, the least impact, by taking extreme measures now so we can get this over with as quickly as possible. Stop this spread and move on. As the Lieutenant Governor said yesterday, the rates, as we find out more and more people have had this and either didn't know it or they just stayed home for a little while and now they're healthy, as we start to put that into the equation, find out that the rates of people that are getting really sick or worse are very, very low. And that's, our president has made that point, as well as our lieutenant governor and our governor. So we will echo what they're doing and follow what they're doing to flatten this curve and get past this as quickly as possible so we can all get back to the business the businesses that we all have. The business of our nation. So again, thank you to the staff. Working really hard, and we'll continue to work hard on this for the foreseeable future. Appreciate all the effort. And I'm moving on now to item number 7. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
Place 3 with a motion to adjourn.
Second.
We'll go place 2 with a second. And any further discussion or questions? All in favor of adjournment?
Aye.
Any opposed? Unanimous. We are adjourned at 2:13 p.m. Thank you very much.